Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, let's talk about Mark Golding and the PNP and the racial attacks or the racist attacks on Mark Golding by the JLP. Now, the JLP's racial attacks on Mark Golding could backfire big time. I think that the JLP has to be careful about the series of attacks that it is launching against Mark Golding's campaign. Now, I believe in political gimmickries. I believe in political opposition, and I think that they should be able to speak with some amount of freedom. But we know that freedom of expression comes with responsibility. It also comes with consequences. Whatever we say, we might be free to say, but it comes with consequences, and we must be responsible in our speech. Now, these are big men. Dr. Andrew Holness and Mark Golding are middle-aged men, and they should be able to exercise some amount of caution. But I am particularly appealing to the JLP under the leadership of Dr. Andrew Holness to exercise caution with regard to Mark Golding's racial identity, or I am not sure, or his national identity. We have to be careful in terms of conditioning our people. We know how impressionable Jamaicans are, and particularly because they do not have access to good information, to quality information, apart from the podcasts that seem to be most of them. I would say 98.9% of the podcasts coming out of Jamaica are partisan. It means, therefore, that they ascribe to a political party. So they only give you from that lens. They give you analysis and information from that partisan lens. They're not there to assess the politics and to help our people to understand the political process and the consequences of a defeat or a loss for any of these parties. So it's on that basis that I'm very, very concerned about what I see happening in modern Jamaica. And people have been writing about it in terms of the racial attacks that have been going on against Mark Golding. First of all, we must understand that it is Jamaica out of many one people. It is out of many one people. Why have we now launched an entire attack on one of our sons, a son of the soil, Mark Golding, because his father was English? Huh? Is that because we're suggesting that because his father was English? Well, remember now that we're living in a global society and people do move from their countries. Jamaicans, for example, are some of the most nomadic people in the world. I repeat that. Jamaicans are some of the most nomadic people who move from country to country that we have in the world. Okay? So Jamaicans should not be discriminating against someone who is coming from the United States or is coming from, wherever they're coming from Britain, from Germany, because we are a migrant group of people. We go around the world. Now, what happens when we obtain reverse racism? If we should go to the to Great Britain, and the people there in Great Britain tell us that we should go back home because we don't belong there, then we begin to talk about racism and white people don't like black people, and we behave as victims, as we like to do. However, when it comes to us exercising and behaving racist against another group of people, we don't like to hear that. We like to behave as if, yeah, that is what we should do. Okay? We like to behave as if that is what we should do. When that is not necessarily that is not what we should be doing. That is not what we should be doing. And we should be very, very careful of what we say and how we treat other people, because the same behavior might come back to haunt us. That same behavior might come back to haunt us. Now, another thing is that we see in the world a desire, for example, Trump to um to eliminate birthright citizenship. Now, that is something also that we're seeing that is happening in our world today. And Jamaicans, for example, if you should study the history, and I think most of us know that Black people or people of African descent are not the original descendants of what we call Jamaica. All right? They were Native American people. Well, some people argue that they were from Africa, and you can argue. Some people say that they were from Asia. Now, I would subscribe that they mostly were from Asia, but whatever you think, the fact is that what you call Black people today were not the original descendants when Christopher Columbus went to Jamaica. So nobody in Jamaica really has any right to suggest that the island belongs to them. In the same way, Europeans and what you call white people in the United States do not have any right to suggest that America belongs to them, right? It's the same sort of dichotomy that we have to understand, okay? They don't have any rights to that land as to suggest that other people should leave and they should stay. But we are seeing that there is a movement today in which people who say that they are the majority as people of African descent are the majority in Jamaica. They are suggesting that they own that landmass and others do not have any rights to that land. And that is not so. We in Jamaica have grown up in an inclusive environment, socially and racially and ethnically inclusive environment that we were once an example to the world. We were once an example to the world. And if you don't believe me, you can go and you can read, and I'm sorry I did not take some of the statements, some of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s statement to the program. But he was very impressed. One of the things that, enamored him to the island of Jamaica was the fact that we were racially inclusive, ethnically inclusive. He saw the Chinese, he saw the Lebanese, well, people of Lebanese descent, Syrian descent, African descent working together. There was no segregation in our country. Of course, we have class segregation there, but it's not in the sense that it was physical. It's more educationally, economically, and in some cases politically. But, once you're able to negotiate and to transcend the educational divide and the political divide and the economic divide, people would not be racist against you. I'm not suggesting that they should, and I'm not suggesting that that was a good time. But for the 1960s, in which the period in which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was living and in which Jamaica was existing at the time, was particularly progressive, given what was happening in the United States and other countries around the world, right? So we have to put that into proper context here. So it's on that basis I am looking at some of the clippings that I see coming out of Jamaica, particularly from Everett Warmington, who seems to have descended into this polygon. Well, I shouldn't say that he has descended, because he has been that way for a long time, and he has not been disciplined by the party. Andrew Holness does not see the need to discipline Edward Warmington. So he continues, and he seems to have apologized. Like, he's coming to the papers this morning for using expletives on the political trail, the political campaign, right? On the campaign trail, he was seen also using expletives in terms of coercing the people to vote for a particular JLP MP, I think it was in St. Mary, and you could hear him and his, his diatribes. But that is how Edward Warmington behaves. But he is also not the root cause of our problem. He is a symptom of our problems because that is how our people behave. Edward Warmington is behaving, even though he should behave better because he is a leader, so he should be setting the standard. He should be a model for our citizens. But he reflects the general tendencies of our people to attack opposition and to attack them in the most brutal way, because that is how we were acculturated. Now, it is very sad at this stage of our history that we have not learned better and that we do not know how to behave and how to respond to our political opponents or to whatever opponents that we have in Jamaica. We just don't know. So we begin to attack them, and sometimes we end up killing them. And that's the sad thing. Sometimes we end up unaliving people because they differ from us and they have different perspectives, different opinions. And that is where our society is a sad one. And it shows that the education system has failed us over the years because Edward Warmington, who should have some amount of education, who should have some amount of experience and exposure, still does not know how to express himself appropriately. Now, it's interesting, though, that the citizens of Jamaica, including the opposition party, Dr. Dayton Campbell, is criticizing Edward Warmington on the use of expletives, which of course I do not support, I do not endorse, but he made some rather other troubling statements than the expletives that he used, because we know that, unfortunately, expletives are used across the world now as normal language. By the US the other day, the President of the United States, he used some F-bombers when he was talking about the situation with the war between Israel and Iran. And he just decided to distill some F-bombers in attacking that problem, in speaking about that problem. Now, Edward Warmington was on the campaign, I think in St. Mary, and we want to listen to him here. I just wanted to show you and for you to hear what he was saying and launching his racial attacks. But the point I was trying to make before I allow you to watch the clipping of the video is that whilst Dayton Campbell and the citizens of Jamaica were particularly not impressed with Edward Warmington's use of expletives, which I don't know why they weren't, because many of them, the typical Jamaican uses expletives as they drink water. Probably even more so, probably as they eat food, as they breathe, I should say. Every word that comes out, or every other word that comes out of the mouth of a Jamaican are expletives. Okay, it's like normality now. It has become the norm in Jamaica. So why do we get offended? And I'm not suggesting that they're the minority who don't. So they should express, and they have all rights to express, and I'm a part of that minority, about what we hear on the platform, on the political trails, on these campaign trails. Okay, I am offended a lot of times. However, the same Jamaicans who are pretending as if they're offended, many of whom are users of expletives in their normal conversations. They use them ad nauseum in Parliament also, and in their private conversations. So the thing about Edward Warmington, which you have to give him credit for, he is not pretending. He says this is the way the politics is, and I'm showing you that it is nasty, it's ugly, it is hideous. And I'm telling you that this is so. We pretend in Jamaica to be who we are not, and as a result of that, we are pretending as if we're offended by what Edward Warmington has to say, and Edward Warmington is this despicable character. But if we should be truthful to ourselves, our politics is despicable. We are, as a people, a despicable people. whether we like it or not. We like to think we're just this great people. But when you look at the state of Jamaica, it is not the land or the physical landscape that has uglified Jamaica. It is the people, right? It is the people who have uglified Jamaica, not the landmass. The deterioration of Jamaica over the years have not been deteriorated by nature itself. Of course, yes, we've had some hurricanes and a few earthquakes here and there. But we have to come to an awareness and to the conclusion, and we have to be truthful to ourselves, that we are the contributors to the pollution, to the social decay, and to the physical decrepitude that we see on that island. We have to, we must come to that awareness and to that conclusion. Will we ever come to that conclusion? I don't think we will ever do that. We will always seek to blame someone else, be they Jamaicans or Americans or somebody else is to be blamed for our own errors and for our setbacks. But Edward Warmington is not the root cause of the problem. He is a symptom. In fact, he is a victim, I should say, of Jamaican culture. He is a typical Jamaican politician and a typical Jamaican son of the soil. Now, I am not a PNP supporter or JLP supporter, I should say. Many of you are trying your best to listen to my words and to say that, yes, and perhaps you will soon be clipping my words and say, yes, it's a PNP. I know you are like that. And you're trying to see something I'm saying. You're searching for a word to say that this guy is hiding as a PNP supporter or a JLP supporter. But I'm not. I'm neither. Never voted in my life. And I don't think I intend to do so based on the political environment in which we find ourselves, in which we live. And I know that it is getting, more polluted, more contaminated day by day. So I do not think, and I never say never, but from my perspective and what I'm seeing now, I don't think that I will ever vote for any of these political tribal parties. Very serious about that, okay? But we have to look at Mark Golding. And for the most part, he's not the best politician. I must say, he's not the typical politician. And maybe I shouldn't say that he's not the best because he's not the typical politician. But with all the attacks that have been launched at him, and when you launch attacks at people and their identity, that is where people, including myself, if I don't control myself, I don't ask God to control myself, people can get very nasty. Right? People get very nasty when you attack their identity, their national identity, their racial identity, their ethnic identity. People do get nasty. Now, Mark Golding has maintained a certain amount, a high level, we should say, of decorum and professionalism. That should be the standard. I don't know how he behaves behind the scene. Maybe he launches the attack privately, I don't know. But in the public, even when questions are posed to him about questioning his national identity, his racial identity, he doesn't get all worked up and get nasty and vicious about it. I think that he has dealt with it professionally, and we have to give him his credit, and he should be an example to the nation. Mark Golding should be an example to the nation as far as that is concerned. But as I'm talking about the racial politics, we have to be fair in everything we say and we do. And as we suggest, as we say in our motto, in our national motto, out of many, one people. We need to get rid of that motto if it's not working for us, if we don't believe in it. And we need to get all people who have any inkling of blood, of any people who are not coming from Africa, which I think that's going to be hard, because in the blackest of Jamaica, even the blackest of citizens in Jamaica have some amount of European blood, Amerindian blood, Asian blood. So I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to have to take everybody out of the politics. Okay? Because if you should explore our DNA. Now, not some of us might have more DNA, you know, that belongs to a certain ethnic group or racial group. So Mark Golding looks more European, okay? And less African than I look. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that he's not Jamaican. Because Jamaican, being a Jamaican doesn't mean how you look. You know, if you should look at people and say this looks like Jamaica or this looks like, go to Brazil and go to, for example, Salvador da Bahia, where you see many of the Black people. And you would wonder, of course, it is more ethnically diverse than Jamaica, even though it's a Black state, but it's far more ethnically diverse than Jamaica is. However, it is, I would say, 70% or more Black. And you see people who look with strong African phenotypes, okay? And you would think that they look like me or they look like any typical Jamaican. The United States, you go there and you look at their Black people and, you know, you can't look at people and think that they are Jamaicans or they're Americans, they're Black Americans or they're Black Brazilians, or it is based on our culture. When you look at the eyes, and because I've been doing cultural and languages and whatever, and I study cultures, I look at eyes, I look at the way people walk, their body language, their accents. Definitely the language is very important, but when you look at a language like English, in which Jamaicans speak English too, the ones who speak English, North Americans, Black Americans speak English too, the ones who speak English, right? And you have to be, in order to differentiate whether this person is Jamaican or Black American or Jamaican, you have to look at the language and the accent that is used when speaking that language. Or else you can't say if they're Black, I would say the person a Black American or is a Jamaican. Okay? Mark Golding, even though he has a lighter hue, okay? A lighter hue, a lighter pigmentation, does not mean, therefore, that he's European, he's British. Because one, Mark Golding, the way how he behaves, he does not behave in any way British. He doesn't speak using the cadence of Britain. He doesn't, right? In fact, as I told you before, Professor Rex Netterford sounded more British than Mark Golding. And he was a Black Jamaican. And you didn't question him in terms of the use of this British Oxfordian cadence. You didn't. You loved him. You embraced him. Okay? Now, why is it now that Mark Golding, who speaks using Jamaican Standard English, well, that's what he uses. And he uses it with a Jamaican accent of that social class. Why is it that he's not Jamaican? You know? I'm sure he likes his jerk chicken and whatever you like. He likes his reggae music. And he behaves like a typical middle class, upper middle class Jamaican does. And you know that. You know that. If you're around them, you hear them, you see them, and the way how they behave, the way how they express themselves, he is an upper middle class Kingstonian. And you know that, but you just don't want, you refuse to look at the facts. You refuse to look at the facts because, you know, like Mark Golding. So you have to say that he's racist. You have to say that he's from England and he's not one of us. You have to impugn his character. Okay? Now, we thought we had already moved away from that sort of pork barrel politics and racialized politics. We thought we had. In fact, when Barack Obama was running for the presidency of the United States, many Jamaicans, you know, were against the racial animus against Barack Hussein Obama. You were offended. And you thought that Americans were not being fair. Now, how are Jamaicans being fair? Remember now, one of the things that they launched against Barack Hussein Obama was that he was not from America. Every time, that's the first sign when a politician is running and you're racist against him or her. and against Barack Obama, the right-wing people, and I read books on that, and I listened to the news, read the news, did everything, okay? And they were saying that he was not from America, that he was born in Kenya. Some people say he was born in Indonesia, okay? Now, can people look at Barack Hussein Obama and know that he's American? Of course he's culturally American. He might have, he might have lived for a short time in Indonesia when his mother was doing research there, but he wasn't born there. But people have to make, there's this guy called Dr. Jeremy, I forgot his last name, who wrote a book, an entire book to show us, to actually demonstrate, and I read the book, that Barack Hussein Obama was born in Kenya. And he doctored papers and did everything he could do to have suggested that Barack Obama was not American at the time. Well, he's an American, but at the time he was suggesting that he wasn't. And that's why he would have been unfit as a political candidate in 2007 when he was running for the election. Okay? So people will go through the length and the breadth of proving that you are not if they hate you. The thing about it is that in Jamaica, people don't want to listen. We are not the people who listen. Once we have latched on to an argument, that is what we are going to have until we die. We're not willing to reflect. And another thing is that we like to follow the masses. Whatever our friends do, whatever our friends say, even though we know it's wrong, I don't want to be the person who looks different, right? I don't want to be that person. And many of us, that's why we're not leaders. We don't have enough leaders in Jamaica. We don't have leaders in Jamaica. What we have are followers. We have all of these followers. People are just following everybody. And there's nobody to stand up and say, this is what is right. Right? This is what is right. Let me see if I could read. Yeah, this is what is right. This is what is right. And I am going to follow that which is right. All right? There's nobody to do that. Okay? There's nobody to do that. And that is why we see now this political disaster. But look at what Edward Warmington has said here. He's apologizing this morning. Warmington regrets controversial MP apologizes for and withdraws expletive charged statement on political platform. And this is what the Gleaner is reporting this morning. Controversial Southwest St. Catherine Member of Parliament MP Everald Warmington has apologized and withdrawn a statement in which he used an expletive on the Jamaica Labour Party platform in Westmoreland on Sunday night. I think I would say Everard, but it's Everald, right? It's Everald Warmington, right? It's not Everard, but it's Everald, right? His name is Everald Warmington. So I apologize for perhaps mispronouncing his name before. I was saying Everard, but it's Everald. Warmington, who has had a long history of making controversial remarks, seemingly surprised both his colleagues and attendees at the meeting, who all seemed befuddled as he dropped the so-called F-bomb and went on speaking, urging JLP supporters to vote for incumbent Westmoreland Central MP George Wright in the impending general election. So he did this not in St. Mary, but in Westmoreland, it seems. Shut your eye and vote for Andrew Holness. This is what Warmington is saying. Warmington told the Labourites, seemingly intimating that a vote for George Wright has also a vote for Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness. Don't stay home. Put the X beside the and the expletive bell. Yesterday, however, Warmington, not known for taking back his words, issued an apology and withdrew the controversial statement, acknowledging that his behavior was inappropriate. I recognize that my comments on the platform yesterday were inappropriate, and I regret offending anyone with the comments I made. So I do withdraw the comments and apologize, his statement read. People's National Party, that's the General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell, who was attending a divisional conference in Frome, Westmoreland, when Warmington made the statement, reacted with disdain while noting that he wanted to see what disciplinary action Holness would take. So they're playing this sort of game with the politics because at the end of the day, and I'm suggesting that I do not endorse expletives. I don't use expletives. I'm a decent guy, whether you like it or not. But the fact of the matter is that there are some other more demeaning and cringeworthy statements that I have seen coming out of the filthy mouth of Everett Warmington than just mere expletives. And I just want to listen to Everett Warmington on the campaign trail. And I think this was in Westmoreland, or wherever it was. But he was giving a speech. And his diatribe against Mark Golding about his being of, our slave masters. He's a descendant of our slave masters. But many of us in Jamaica are descendants of slave masters. Right? Many Jamaicans are descendants of slave masters. It doesn't mean, therefore, that they believe in what their slave masters did. Many of our mulatto Jamaicans, even dark-skinned Jamaicans, many of our Jamaicans, because some Jamaicans who were Africans were involved in the African slave trade, right? Africans were also involved in the African slave trade. And when Jamaicans went there, some of them who were liberated, they participated in that trade. Okay? So we can't now say that because your parents believed in something or practiced an immoral deed, that the children, their descendants, sometimes they do. Children sometimes do, but in some cases they don't. So we can't blame the children, their descendants, for the parents' ill-advised behavior. We should, all right? We should not. I think that in Jamaica, we should be better than that. All right? We should have long grown up, and we should not be following what the US does in her politics and other countries also. We are more mature, or we should. I don't think we are, but we should be more mature. So let's listen to that Everett Warmington, not Everard, but Everett Warmington on the campaign trail. Shall we? Let me get it here to make sure that the sun is up and in its strong force, and might be doing some blocking my screen here. But let us see if we can get to that video.
That was slave owners. No. We in this country, we thought it was only white missionaries from England that were slave owners. No, you have white slave owners too. You have white Jewish slave owners. Mark Golding, great-grandfather, Benjamin Eunice and Esther Eunice, a Jew. They buried in a Union Street during 70 months of the day. Okay? And hold on. We're Christians also now. Who killed Christ? The Jew. All right. Who killed Christ? But we're not Jew. Why you know that? Not only his wife, but who killed Christ? And we love Christ. In his great-grandfather will, dated April 18, 1835. And Benjamin Eunice beginning of Jamaica, in the name of God, amen. I, Benjamin Eunice, of the person named James, in the county of Cornwall, of Jamaica, being in weak body and soul mind. I didn't dead since a weak body. This is my last will and testament Whereas to instrument to Dr. William Gordon, introduce from Gordon, the Gordon Hill. He said, give them one for each. He said, hi.
Sorry, I was just wondering, who is this person here? Is this Andrew Holness? I'm not sure who this is, but if that is Andrew Holness, I think Andrew Holness should have stood up and told him to stop that. But, you know, I'm not sure. The balloon is sort of hiding his face. I'm not sure, but it looks like it has the features of Andrew Holness, of Dr. Andrew Holness. Is he?
Compensation from the British government for great number of slaves in my possession. It means that Mark Golding, great grandfather, one of the largest slave owners in Jamaica. And in a state, say what Western Union must keep it with them after that. It's the most distributed among the eight people. Tenant in common, so it transcends all the wealth down to them. The then name Robert, Sarah, Maria, Benjamin, Russell, Matilda, Emily, and Charles. Matilda is a great-grandmother of Mark Gold.
Okay, I think we have gotten the gist of what Everard, why am I calling him Everard? Everard Warmington is doing. Now, when I watched the video first, I had but to come to this sort of question. I am not saying it's a conclusion, it's a question. Don't attack me now and say that I'm saying that that is so, but I question things. And I wonder if Everard Warmington got this research done by the University of the West Indies or from somebody in history or from another university. I don't know. Do you think that Everard Warmington would have gone into such research and gone into deep research about Mark Golding's great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather? Very interesting sort of historical, if it's true, analysis that he's doing. But the fact is, if Everard Warmington is suggesting that, then we also have to attack other Jews that we see in Jamaica, like the Ronnie Thwaites, who was a part of the political landscape, a part of the communication landscape in Jamaica. Why not attack him? Why Mark Golding? And as far as I'm concerned, when he was going up for MP, that is Ronnie Thwaites, nobody attacked him. Neither from the JLP or the PNP, nor from the PNP. Attacked his racial, ethnic background. So why are they attacking Mark Golding? Is it because Mark Golding has a much more smoother personality and he's not the one to get back at them? I don't know. But it is rather strange that Everard Warmington is having a deep dive, doing a deep dive into Mark Golding's history. Now, based on our understanding, Mark Golding's father went to Jamaica in the 1960s. It could be that he had family, he was British, that were on the island before. But we don't know if Mark Golding or Mark Golding's father's father, having any sort of Mark Golding's father. Yes, that's Mark Golding's father's father. Yes, correct. And sometimes you have to check all of these apostrophes to make sure that you're saying the right thing. And I still hope that I'm saying the right thing, right? But the fact is that I am not aware that Mark Golding had any familiar ties to Jamaica prior to his father going there, but there might have been, because this is a very small world. So I'm not suggesting here that Everard Warmington is speaking untruth. What I'm suggesting is that he would have gone through the length, rather than looking at policies in how they are going to improve the lives of Jamaicans. He's there attacking Mark Golding's racial identity, rather than looking at the people who are making contributions to Mark Golding's campaign and how these people might severely affect the future of Jamaicans. Okay? he is there attacking Mark Golding's racial identity. And the people who sit in the boardrooms on the in the corporate rooms of the Bank of Jamaica and all of these corporate structures in Jamaica are people of Mark Golding's ilk and racial, not necessarily ilk, but his racial identity, his racial and ethnic identity. Many of these people who sit in these top corporate boardrooms are of Mark Golding's racial identity, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it. And these are the people who wield power in Jamaica, not Mark Golding, really, and Andrew Holness. These are the people who wield the power in Jamaica. And that is why I have been calling on my platform that we need to know who are the economic, the financial contributors to these campaign trails, to these parties on their campaign trails. We need to know that. If we don't know these people, if we do not know the financial powers behind these political campaigns, you really don't know who's running Jamaica, because these people are just the face of the power structure. But the power structures are the ones behind the face of Andrew Holness and Mark Golding, and these people are not people who look like you and the typical Jamaica. We know the 21 families that control Jamaica. Many of them, if any of them, are Black. Okay? They're not Black. But yet still we're attacking Mark Golding. Why don't we attack the root, attack the whole system at its root, at its core? Why don't we do that? Why are we attacking one person and thinking that if we get rid of Mark Golding tomorrow, and even if another white man, and Mark Golding doesn't even look like the typical white person. He's a Jew, and I'm sure he has other mixing in his DNA. Okay? But I was looking at Mark Golding on the campaign trail with one of DK Duncan's daughters, and who embraced him when he went on the platform. And when you look at them, I'm sorry I did not take that to you. They don't look. Mark Golding is not much lighter than she is, right? There are lots of other, Edward Circle was lighter than Mark Golding. Ronnie Thwaites is lighter than Mark Golding. Okay? But why are we now at this juncture of our history, at this stage of our history when we are poverty-stricken and not much is going on for Jamaica, why don't we now try to look at matters that are of concern and of more importance than somebody's ethnic or racial descent? Why don't you attack the Chinese? The Chinese who are there, people are suggesting that these people are getting monies from government and they're not paying any taxes. Somebody had a very good video, I must say. I'm not saying that this is true also, but it's a question worth asking. A lot of things that you do and questions that you pose, not because you say that it's what you believe, but these are questions that should be posed. And a Jamaican posed a question the other day, which I thought was a good question, a fair question. He says that in all his years going to pay taxes at the tax office, he has never seen a Chinese person. And perhaps we're talking about the Chinese, the recently arrived Chinese, because I'm sure the Jamaican Chinese who have been there all their years have been paying their taxes, I would think. Okay? But the recently arrived ones that have been coming since 2000 and probably the latter part of the 1990s, that he has never seen a recently arrived Chinese immigrant paying taxes. That's what he's saying. I'm not saying that is true. I've never been to the tax office to pay taxes, so I don't know. But that is what he's suggesting. Those of you who pay your taxes, can you let me know if you've ever seen a recently arrived Chinese immigrant paying taxes to the tax office? Many of them get their tax breaks just for starting up a business, and we know that they get other breaks and they get land and they get lots of things that Jamaicans do not get. Okay, so these are the things that we should be talking up against rather than speaking up against. And we should force Mark Golding, should he win the election, to address these problems. these inequities, these social and economic inequities that exist, that are deeply entrenched in Jamaica. These are the things that we should be speaking about. Right? Now, Robert Daly did write an article in the Jamaica Gleaner, Stop the Racism. I didn't pull it up, but if I could say, pull up that article, and it was a pretty good, decent article that he wrote in the Jamaica Gleaner. That's Robert Daly. And he says, stop the racism against Mark Golding. I'm trying to pull up the article. I did not pull it up before I came here. So yeah, but he said, stop the racist remarks against Mark Golding. And this was a letter that was written on June 28th, 2025. The Gleaner columnist Norris MacDonald wrote an interesting column and headlined Garvey's Ghost and Jamaica's Roast Breadfruit Politics, which I quoted from in my last video. Make sure you go to the video and like it and subscribe it. You know, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot of momentum as far as the PNP is concerned. Last week, when I posted the video on election shock that Andrew Holness would have won according to the Don Anderson report, you know, the JLP were behind it and they were like, wow, and they supported the video. The PNP doesn't seem to be as enthusiastic about the likelihood of Mark Golding winning the next general election. I'm not sure. Or it's just that they've given up. I don't know. Now, the article says here, the Jamaica Labour Party was once led by touring figures like Sir Alexander Bustamante. This is what Norris MacDonald was suggesting. Was once led by touring figures like Sir Alexander Bustamante, Donald Sangster, and Edward Sever, who were not Black. So it's bizarre, if not downright hypocritical, that this party now injects racial animus into the national discourse by attacking Mark Golding for being a white Jamaican, a so-called white Jamaican. White Jamaican in quotes, of course. I thank Mr. MacDonald for writing about this issue. The racist remarks are aimed at opposition leader and the president of the People's National Party, Mark Golding, who is an accomplished banker, eminent attorney at law, and an investor. A high-ranking member of the JLP stated at a party meeting that Mr. Golding is a white man, not belonging to Jamaica, and that concomitantly, he should go back to England. And people are talking like that on my videos. Mark Golding is not Jamaican and he should return to England. Now, what is the evidence? What evidence do you have to suggest that Mark Golding is not Jamaican? If you can present a copy of his birth certificate to suggest otherwise, and why doesn't Andrew Holness, I'm suggesting, as the incumbent government, why doesn't he go to the office and get a copy of his birth papers and say that he's not? But Andrew Holness knows better, right? This was the most unacceptable political diatribe and vastly irresponsible comment. These comments have no place in modern Jamaican politics. Mark Golding is a Jamaican and is seeking to become prime minister. He is Jamaican. Now, you might be saying that he's an elite Jamaican. Yes, he is. You might say that he's an elite Jamaican who is not he's not attuned to Jamaica's hardships and sufferings. And I would agree with you. I would concur with you. But so are many of our politicians, Michael Manley's and the Norman Washington Manley's and the Bustamantes and all these people. They just were not attuned to what was happening to suffering Jamaicans because they did not suffer in the way that the typical Jamaicans are suffering. And that is what we have to understand. And I can see why you are sympathizing with Andrew Holness because he's from the working class and all of that stuff. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that he's on your side. Okay? As we can see. Now, we should be celebrating the many successes of Golding. I don't know what many successes he has, and be willing to responsibly debate his proposed plans, that I can say, ideas, programs, and vision for Jamaica if he becomes the prime minister. However, the political rotten JLP diatribe coming from some persons from the party against Mark Golding must be condemned and has no place in this ongoing general election campaign. The racist comments against Golding must immediately be brought to an end, and Andrew Holness, being a responsible prime minister and thoughtful JLP leader, must publicly condemn those ongoing racist comments. And I think he should. Racism has absolutely no place in Jamaican politics. Give the respect to PNP President Golding, even while some may disagree with him and the PNP. Yeah, we should be attacking his policies or his lack of policies. That is what we should be attacking, not the man's racial identity, nor his national identity. We should be doing that, not at this level. But this is what we have been degraded to, because both political parties lack anything substantive to say to the Jamaican people, so they have to resort to personal diatribes and ad hominem attacks. That is what they have to resort to, because there's nothing to say to you. There's nothing to say to you, because they know that the decisions are already made in Washington, D.C., in Brussels, in London, so they have nothing to say to you. So the only thing they have to do is to just attack each other. And whoever is able to punch each other and who gets the heaviest of punch and is knocked out, then the opponent is going to win. And that is what they depend on. And Jamaicans are supporting that sort of politics. Jamaicans are supporting it. And then you're going to cry. When things get hard, you're going to cry. And Andrew Holness is in his mansion, being attended to by his servants there. You're going to cry. Or not only Andrew Holness, Mark G. And having their feet massaged by a Black Jamaican. Right? Having their feet massaged by a Black Jamaican. And their meals cooked by a Black Jamaican. Right? Because at the end of the day, whether the politician is dark-skinned or he's white, his servants are going to be Black Jamaicans. Go to the king's, what do you call it, the governor general's, the king's house, his residence, the governor general's residence, and see who is cutting the lawn, who's attending to his house, who's cleaning his house, who's cooking his meals. The same, go to Jamaica's house and look at the hue of the people doing that. People who look like me, who look like the ordinary Jamaican. They're the ones who are doing it. And you don't cry racism. You don't say, you know, why are you using my brother and sister as, why is she a servant? Why is he a servant? Doing the most, you know, demeaning. It's not demeaning, I should say. But that is how you're thinking. That Mark Golding should not become prime minister because he's white. And the population is predominantly dark-skinned. So we don't want any white man at the helm of our nation to run our nation. But at the end of the day, the decisions are made in Washington, D.C., where you have a lot of white men who are anti-Jamaicans, by the way. The IMF is not pro-Jamaica. In Brussels, that don't think much of Jamaicans and Jamaica. In London, that was a former slave master from the country that you say that he's from. So if the decisions are made there, whether or not Mark G, let us say that he was British for real, right? It doesn't matter, because the decisions are made there and in Washington, D.C. Your financial decisions and where Jamaica should be going, okay, are made there. You are not the ones who determine. Andrew Holness, Dr. Andrew Holness, he could have 1,000 PhD before his name. He does not decide what happens financially in Jamaica. Okay? So attacking Mark Golding is not going to solve the problem. Even if a black jet becomes prime minister tomorrow, and we can see what is happening in Haiti. Even if a person as black as I am become prime minister tomorrow, it won't change the course unless that person has the audacity to stand up to the system. But the system is not only domestic, the system is global. So good luck to that person who's going to be dark-skinned, who's going to be African, and stand up. We don't even have a strong military to ward off military attacks from the United States and from Europe. We don't. So you can sit there and think that Mark Golding's hue, right, is going to impact how he governs Jamaica or not. And he's going to do something substantially different, I should say, from what Andrew Holness is doing. He's not going to even veer off the path. They might have different style, but the same agenda. the same agenda. That is what we have to understand. And we need to stop this racist attacks on Mark Golding, which is going to affect you and your children, because when they assume the reins of power, they are going to spill those racist attacks onto you. And they are going to treat you like slaves in your own country. So you've got to wake up. You've got to understand the reality and stop following your politicians and behaving like animals and behave like decent, civilized people. Because if the JLP does not get its act together, it might end up losing the elections because of the racist attacks against a son of the soil in the person of Mark Jefferson Golding. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. See you in another one. Ciao.